All right, our guest speaker today is Albert Wilde. Albert is a sixth-generation sheep and cattle rancher who lives in Croydon, Utah with his wife and 7 children. Anybody from up near Croydon? Morgan, Hannaford. What county is that, Albert? Morgan County. Anybody from Morgan County? Oh, all right. Well, it's a beautiful place. After graduating high school, Albert lived 2 years in Australia, serving a mission for his church where he learned to speak Spanish. After returning to the ranch, Albert helped start 2 different businesses, each focused on generating profits from unused or underused resources of the ranch. In 2003, Albert co-founded Widowmaker LLC, which ran 2 national extreme sporting events. The Widowmaker Motorcycle Hill Climb ran for 10 years. Albert was the marketing director and handled the sponsorships, working with companies like Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Honda, Polaris, Red Robin, and many others. He also worked with film and TV companies like NBC, MTV, OLN, and others that came to film the events. In 2015, Albert discovered that he could use waste wool as a fertilizer and soil amendment. Working with Pioneer greenhouses to trial and test this new product, they were able to obtain a patent in the US and Canada. Albert received the Green Business Award for Innovation in 2017 and was a runner-up in the American Farm Bureau Entrepreneurial Challenge in 2018. Since then, he's worked on further studies, worldwide marketing, and selling his patented wool pellets. So please welcome Albert Wilde.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for all being here, and hopefully I won't disappoint any of you. So like Russ mentioned, I grew up on a farm, and one thing about our farm was, and most farms today, farmers don't make a lot of money, right? And with our farm specifically, we're kind of, you could say, like Old Testament type of things, right? Where the oldest son gets everything and everyone else goes and makes their way in the world, right? Like the 3 little pigs. My problem was I was not the oldest. I had an older brother. And I knew that my older brother always wanted to stay and work on the farm. So that meant I was getting the boot, and I'd have to go and figure out something to do with my life. However, when I got home from my mission, my dad was like, hey, we have enough work. There's plenty of work. And I think that maybe we can make it financially if you want to stay and work on the farm. I did not think that that opportunity would be ever afforded to me, but I was thrilled, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I started working on the farm, and it was 3 years after I'd gotten married that it's 2 years after I got married that we were approached by a event promoter. And the event promoter was like, oh, you guys have the best hill in North America, right? Like it's super steep, it's going to be super challenging, and you're close to, a population center. So he was like, we want to come and we want to bring back the Widowmaker Hill Climb, which had always been held in Draper, and there at the south end of the Salt Lake Valley, until, it was there for like 20 years until 1988. And he's like, we want to bring that back and have it here on your property. And so he told us, he said, it'll be a 2-day event, and we're just going to come in and we're going to do everything. Like we're going to do all the work, and we're just going to write you a big fat check at the end of the 2-day event. We were like, that sounds awesome, right? However, it didn't work out that way. And one thing I learned is that typically event promoters are full of it, right? Like they can be smooth talkers, but they're typically not real hard workers. And so anyway, that was the case with this promoter. So as we started down this road and we had the event planned and he was going to go out and get sponsorships and do all of this, we were like, well, who's going to take care of the health department? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, we had to get a mass gathering permit. So I was like, oh, I'll do it. Like, I've never dealt with the health department before, but I'll go and see what we need to do to get a mass gathering permit. So anytime you're going to have an event of 500 people or more, you have to get a mass gathering permit. So I go to the health department, and the health department, like a lot of government agencies, typically aren't very nice, right, to you at first, right? Like, they're just like, no, this is what you got to do. So they told me, they said, you're going to have this many bathrooms. You're going to have to, like, we're going to have to inspect all of this. Like, every food vendor has to have, a food license. I'm like, okay, I get all that. And then they said, you're going to have 6,000 gallons of free water. I'm like, 6,000 gallons of free water, drinkable water. And I'm like, okay, where am I going to get that at, right? Because we're doing this in our field at the base of this hill. Anyway, so I started calling around to different water companies, and they all gave me a price per gallon of the water. So I'm looking at this and I'm pricing this out, and I'm like, oh man, it's going to be like $3,000, right? To have them bring the water and have the water there available for the event. And as I was calling around, I called Mount Olympus in Salt Lake, and the guy there was like, when I told him what I needed, he was like, you need what? For what? I said, I need 6,000 gallons of water for this event. And he said, no. He said, I can guarantee you, you will never use 6,000 gallons of free water. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter whether I'm going to use it or not. I've got to have it because the health department won't give us a health permit unless we get that. He said, I'll tell you what, I will provide the 6,000 gallons of free water free of charge. And have you signed a deal with Coke or Pepsi yet? And I was like, no. And he's like, so if you will give me the right to sell water at your event, the exclusive right, I'll not only provide the free water, I will also pay you $1,000. Was like, that sounds awesome, right? So I go and tell the promoter this, and I'm like, hey, I sold this sponsorship, right? And he's like, no. He's like, don't sell sponsorships. He's like, you got to leave it up to a professional. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you want to do because I need the free water. Everyone else is like $3,000. This guy's going to provide it for free, and he's going to give us the $1,000 sponsorship. He's like, okay, fine. Well, anyway, that worked into eventually us realizing that the promoter wasn't getting anything done that he had promised. And so I started just calling people to get sponsorships. Just out of the blue, calling up, companies, and I'm like, hey, we're trying to get a sponsorship for this event. Here's our sponsorship packages. And I started selling sponsorships. I did not go to school for that. I didn't go to school for marketing. I went to Weber State. I really went to school to find a wife. That's what I did. And it was successful. So I like telling people, they're like, oh, you met your wife at college. Like, what did you study? And I was like, well, I was in the study abroad program. I was studying this abroad and that abroad. And anyway, my wife doesn't like when I tell that joke, but that's why I was there. So, needless to say, I did not go to school for marketing. But it's something that then I started learning to do. Started learning to, how to talk to different companies and their marketing director and finding out what it is they wanted and what they were looking for. And so we ran We ran the Widowmaker hill climb for 10 years, the motorcycle. We ran the snowmobile for 3 years. Had all sorts of sponsors. Had television that came out and filmed it. It was fun, and it was great. The reason that we ended it was because of insurance reasons. So the insurance cost of having an extreme sports event is high. And for us, having a farm, we found out because of another event who had a problem, and their insurance company then waffled on them, walked back on what they promised, and didn't cover it. And we actually went and talked to an attorney, and he's like, "You guys are crazy." He's like, "You guys are inviting, 5,000 to 8,000 people to your property every year, and you're like, if any of them have a problem, if any of them fall, if any of them get a bee sting, right? Like you have this asset of land, they could come after you, right?" And he's like, "So you really got to have this insurance." So when we looked into that insurance, it was way too expensive for us. And only having an event for 2 days a year, I learned that that's not a good business plan to make a living, right? I mean, if you get done with your event and you're like, "I made $10,000, you're like, "That's awesome. But now I've got like 5 partners to split that with. So we each get $2,000 and I just put, 3 months of work into this." That doesn't pencil out. I'm just saying that's worse than any college student, right? So we're like, okay, we're gonna stop doing that. And then that's what led me into, but my point of all this was because I felt like there was, like I had to do something. If I wanted to stay and work on the farm, I had to do something. I had to make some more profit because there wasn't enough just on the farm. One of those things that I started to do is because a friend of mine who owns a pallet company in Salt Lake said, "You should make compost." And I'm thinking, compost, I don't know. Like, really? He's like, "Yeah, you have land and you have animals and you have the water. Like you could make compost." And he's like, "And I'll sell it." At first I'm like, I don't know. But then I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Like for our animals, we don't produce a lot of manure that's like collectible because the animals are up on the mountain all the time. They're on the open range, right? So I'm like, it's just not feasible. But as I was talking to a lady from the NRCS, she was like, "Oh, you should do that." She's like, "I can line you up with all these farmers who do have a problem with their manure." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So my friend was providing the wood. I got the manure. I started making compost, right? And it was a good deal. It was just a gentleman's agreement, just a handshake, right? I was going to make it. He was providing the truck. He was providing the loader, and he was going to sell it. And when he sold it, he was just going to pay me half of it. I was like, okay, sounds great. So I started doing that. And as I started doing that, I had one of the farmers say, "What about composting dead animals? Like, would you compost dead animals?" I'm like, "Sure, I don't know." I kind of looked into it and I thought, yeah, sure, I can take dead animals and compost them, right? And he's like, "Great. Then, because I get dead animals that I want to get rid of and get off the farm." And so I started doing that. I started just saying, "Hey, any farmer that has any dead animals or whatever and wants a place to bring them for us to take care of them, we'll compost them." And as I did that, we run sheep, right? My grandfather had always been like, "Oh, wool doesn't decompose," right? Like you shear the sheep, the wool is there on the ground for like a long time, right? The next year it's still there. And, you know, they had always been like, yeah, it doesn't decompose. Well, I'm getting sheep that were dead, right? And I'm putting them into the compost pile. And in like 3 to 4 weeks, they're gone, right? There's nothing left. You don't find the bones, right? The bones are gone. The wool wasn't, I mean, you might find a little bit, but there wasn't much there. And I'm just like, I wonder what the wool is doing for my compost, right? Like, am I making my compost better or am I making it worse, right? So I started looking, I Googled like how much nitrogen, how much, nutrients are in wool. And I couldn't find very much. I found a paper from like the 1800s that said wool was 17% nitrogen. And I thought, no way. And so I went to the extension agent that was there in Morgan from Utah State. And I asked him, I said, hey, do you know anything about wool and the nutrient value that it may have? And he said, I've never heard of that. So he's like, I'll look into it. So he looks into it and he found me this study from the University of Berlin. And this study from the University of Berlin just said wool is an effective fertilizer for tomatoes. So I thought, okay. It didn't have an NPK rating, didn't say how much nitrogen was there. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So my wife had asked me if there was any way that I could make it so she didn't have to water her plants as often, because she loves her plants on the porch. And like she's thinking in her head like a drip irrigation system, right? Like my husband's a farmer. Like he knows irrigation. He can do drip irrigation systems for me. And it'll make it so easy, right? Well, what she didn't know, because she was from Murray and she's a city girl, so she didn't realize that farmers don't typically think that way, right? So I was just like, oh, drip irrigation system, that would be way too difficult. I'm like, I know what I can do though. I can use some of the waste wool that we have and I'll put it around her plants. And the wool holds water, right? I knew this because if a sheep fell into the ditch or whatever, it's like twice as heavy as it was before. So I thought, this will work. So I put the wool around her plants. She came out and she was like, why did I marry a farmer, right? Like, what did you do to my plants? This is terrible. And I was like, just believe in me, dear, right? It'll work, I promise. Well, we were able to go on vacation, come home 7 days later during the middle of summer, and her plants looked fantastic. No one had watered them. No one had cared for them. Not only did they not wilt, but they looked better. And she's like, well, I think you have something here. She's like, I think this is something that like every woman would want. So I'm like, oh, okay. So my friend who owns a pallet company, the guy that was 2 doors down from him in Salt Lake had a pellet mill, made wood pellets. Now, this guy that made the wood pellets, he had spent quite a few years building up his business and making wood pellets. The problem here in Utah is we live in a desert. There's not a lot of wood, right? So he was buying sawdust from my friend. And one thing happened for him is that he decided to go cheap on his bags. He's like, I got to save money. So he went cheap on his bags that he was putting the wood pellets in. And the bags started to break inside the stores. Well, if you want your product in a store, the store can't lose money on it, right? That's just a little secret, right? The stores, if the product is breaking because you've gone cheap on your bags and your product is now spilling, not only does that cost them labor to clean it up, but they also can't sell it. So all of his contracts canceled him. And he was just like, I'm done. I've lost all of my business. And because I tried to go cheap on my packaging. Well, he went to my friend and said, hey, you want to buy the pellet mill from me? Because I'm done. So my friend was like, sure, I'll buy it. And he tells me this, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, right? Because why don't I bring down some of my wool and we'll try and make pellets? And he's like, okay. I mean, he's got $1 million mill, right, that he just bought. And he's just like, okay, fine, bring down the wool. We'll try and make pellets, wool pellets. So that's what we did. During this interval, there was a 2-week period in which I had lined up to go to the mill to make the pellets, that this greenhouse grower in Ogden came up. Well, he called me. I had called him a year before with the compost, and I'm like, hey, I've got some compost. It's awesome. And he was like, you don't have anything I want. And hung up on me. I was like, ooh, nice guy. Anyway, I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. But a year later, he called me up and he said, do you have organic steer manure? I'm like, it's as organic as it gets, right? And he's like, well, can I come up and get a sample of it? I'm like, okay. So he comes up and he starts telling me about a tomato project that he was doing for Costco. Now his big clients are Costco and Lowe's. He's got 25 acres of greenhouse. It's huge. And he's like, I wanted Costco said that they would give me the contract from Salt Lake to Seattle, this whole area, if I can produce organic tomatoes for them. And so he's like, that's what I'm going to do. So he tells me this. Well, I had gone to the extension agent and I had this study from the University of Berlin that said wool is an effective fertilizer for tomatoes, right? So I'm like, oh, like, this is awesome. Like, have you ever thought of using wool, right? I haven't made wool pellets yet. I haven't even pelletized it yet, but I'm going to in 2 weeks. Would you like to try it? And he's like, no. He's like, I've been in the business 40 years. You're not telling me anything I don't know, right? And I was just like, well, okay. Because I've got this study that I got through the extension agent in Utah State. And he's just like, no. He's like, I have the best plant physiologist in the country from Michigan State. I'm like, okay. So he goes home. I give him the sample of steer manure. He goes home. He actually ended up calling his consultant from Michigan State and saying, hey, I talked to this stupid farmer today, and he told me that about wool and using wool. Have you ever heard anyone ever using that? And he's like, the professor was like, no, never heard of it. He's like, honestly, it couldn't be that good. It's just a protein like hair, maybe 2 or 3% nitrogen. That's it. But it can't be that good. And he's like, but I'll look into it and see if there's anything out there and let you know. Well, it took him 10 minutes. He found the exact same study from the University of Berlin, called him up and said, hey, maybe this guy's onto something. Look at this study. And he sent him the study from the University of Berlin, which he now accepted and read because it's coming from a professor and not some stupid farmer, right? So he looks at this and he's like, oh. So he calls me that night and he says, hey, can I come up and talk to you about using wool? And I'm like, yeah, come on up tomorrow, right? And I tell my wife, I'm like, something happened. I don't know what happened, but something happened. So he comes up and I said, I haven't even made the pellets yet, but I'm going to, and I'll get them to you. So we lined up to do this tomato trial at his place. The professor from Michigan came out and we set up this trial. And so what we did is we ran 30 tomato plants in each of the categories. One was no fertilizer whatsoever, right? And it was all in peat. That's typically what in horticulture, what they're using in the potted plants, right? So it was just peat and perlite, no fertilizer. And then the next 30 was peat, perlite, and blood meal. That was the fertilizer that he was using, which blood meal is about the highest organic nitrogen fertilizer that you can find. It's 12% nitrogen. And that's what he was using. And it was taking him 76 days to grow from seed to be market ready. So the plants are up about this high. So it's taken him 76 days to do that. And then we did, the next 30 was blood meal and 5% wool pellets blended together. And then it was just 5% wool pellets, and then it was 10% wool pellets. And at 38 days, which is half the time, this is what we found. The tomatoes that had the 5% or the 10% wool pellets were market ready. They could be shipped out to Lowe's, right? Or Costco. The ones with the blood meal were a little bit better than the ones without any fertilizer, but not much, right? Because the blood meal wasn't kicking in yet, wasn't available for the plant yet. But the wool, it was available immediately. So it was half the time. That's where the professor from Michigan State was like, no. He's like, I don't believe this. He's like, someone has screwed up this trial. And the owner of the greenhouse was like, no, oh no, we're professional around here. We didn't mess this up. And the professor's like, no, we need to go up to Utah State. We need to have it independently verified. And he's like, and Utah State has like the best guy in the country to find the release curve. So we went up to Utah State. They replicated everything that we did and found the release curve for the wool. So typically on like blood meal or most organics, it's very low until about day 45. And then it starts being available for the plant. And then they'll have a regular bell curve. The wool on day 1 was starting at 4,000 parts per million. And then it was dropping. And about day 20, it had a trough at about 800 parts per million. And then it started its regular bell curve on the release. So this was providing a quick release, but then also a slow release, right? Which is what we were seeing here. And that's where the professors were like, whoa, it's like, you've got something. This is awesome. And the professor from Utah State would, like afterwards, he told me, he's like, you know, when you first came, he's like, at the university, when we do trials and we do studies, typically people come in with ideas and we just have to be like, yeah, okay, right? And then we do the study and we're like, see, your idea stinks, right? And he's like, when you came in and you're some stupid sheep farmer, and you're telling me wool, he's like, that's exactly what I thought. I thought, oh man, we may have to call campus security to get this guy out of here when he starts crying and he gets, I don't know. But, it's going to be bad when I tell him that wool is not very good used for socks, right? Anyway, he's like, He's like, I was wrong. He's like, this is good. He's like, I think this is the best organic fertilizer I've ever seen. So anyway, I was like, okay, right? We have a product, we have validation. And I'm like, and now we can start selling it, right? The guy from Pinea, the owner here, he was just like, oh yeah. He's like, this is great. Well, he had funded the study at Utah State. He had funded getting the patent. So now the patent is owned by me and him, right? And his brother. His idea, he was just like, look, this is so fantastic. We're going to go take it and we're going to pitch it to some great big company, right? And this big company is huge. And so he's like, we're going to pitch it to them and they're going to buy it from us. And they're going to cut us a check for like $1 million each. And we're going to walk into the sunset happy as pigs in slop, right? It didn't happen that way. What did happen is we went there. They looked at the studies, the science that we had. They replicated everything themselves. They did all the studies again. It didn't matter that it was from Utah State. They're like, we're going to do it. We need to make sure we can replicate it. So they replicated it. They did some studies we didn't even think of. So then when we went back and met with them, they showed us everything that they had done, all the information they had gathered on our product. And they said, it's fantastic. We love it. It's a great idea. However, we don't develop and market products. They said, we put this through a market analysis and it's going to cost you $5 million to get this product into the market so that people know what it is and people will buy it. So they said, you go spend the $5 million, you go get the product into the market. And when you reach that point and you get there, we'll come in and we'll buy everything you can make. They gave us the numbers and they were like, we'd buy every pound of wool in the US. That's how much they would need for just a project for them to do it. But it's going to take, they were like, it's going to take me $5 million. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know where I'm going to get that. Right? So the owner of Pioneer was kind of like, oh, what? Like, I thought this was going to be easy money, right? And I'm like, well, I'm a sheep rancher and I still want people to buy wool, right? Like, and this is a great idea and it's a great product. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to start selling it, right? I put in for the Farm Bureau Rural Entrepreneurial Challenge. So it's a business plan competition, right? And if you won, it was like $30,000. If you were a runner-up, it was $15,000. So there's 4 finalists. Each of them, the winner got 30, the others got 15. And so I put in for that. And out of like 550 entries across the country, first I was chosen to be one of the top 10. And they were like, notified us, and they're like, we want all of you, the top 10, to come back to Washington, D.C., and we're going to give you some free education and stuff like that. There's a lot of things I learned. One of the things is we went to an investment summit. So at this investment summit, we were able to be there with all these basically sharks, right? And they could tell us what they like and what they didn't like, right? And so here was all of these mostly young kids, right? And why were they young kids? Anyone know why? Most of the entrepreneurs were young kids. How many of you in here own a home? Raise your hands. Okay, the 2 older people, right? None of you college kids own a home, right? How many of you guys have like money in the stock market? Okay, how many of you guys have 100,000 in the stock market? Good, right? The problem is entrepreneurs in this sense are typically young people because they are willing to take a risk, right? Once you get older, you're like, ooh, whoa, wait, that's risky. And I don't know if I'm willing to lose what I have for something more, right? That's out there, right? The bird in hand's worth 2 in the bush, sort of thing. Well, that's what I learned. I was different because I had a home. I was already older. And I'm like, oh. So these sharks, that's one thing they told me. They're like, you're not our customer. You're never going to take our money. It's like, I want $1 million. I want $5 million. And they're like, yeah, but you won't want to take our terms. Someone who has nothing, they're willing to take the terms, right? If any of you guys have a business idea and you go to a shark and he says, I'll give you $1 million, right? You don't have to pay that back. If you lose, I lose. And you walk away, right? You don't go to jail because you defrauded them. You don't lose your home, right? That guy is just out $1 million. Well, way easier for you, right? Anyway, that's one thing I learned. Another thing that I learned at the investment summit was that the sharks, they don't want to run your business. They want you to run your business. And when they give you money, when someone gives you money, I don't care who it is, when anyone gives you money, it's because they believe in you, right? If you go out and get angel investors, it's because they believe in you. An angel investor is your family and friends. That's who an angel investor is, okay? But it's because they believe in you, not because they believe in anything else. So one of the other things that, I'd like to point out about entrepreneurship is if you want to be an entrepreneur, the best way to do it is go get a job. Go get a job. I don't care where. It doesn't matter, right? But why? The reason why is because you have to figure out some way that someone wants something that you can provide. There's a problem, you need to solve it, right? That's what it is. There's a problem, you need to solve it. Now you can sit around all day long and try and be like, oh, okay, what's a problem I can solve in the world, right? But that's only an idea. If you go get a job, right? You work somewhere and you see, wait, I've got this, the friend of mine that owns a pallet company, he was working as a driver, driving pallets. He now owns a $40 million pallet business, right? Because he saw something he could do. He could refurbish pallets, right? From Albertsons or Costco, they were picking up, he was the driver, and they were going and picking up pallets. And he was like, you know what? If we just refurbish these pallets, instead of just trying to sell them new ones, we could sell it back and make a profit. You know what his boss told him? No, we're not doing that. Right? And he was just like, look. And he talked to the guy from Albertsons, and he's like, the guy was like, yeah, man, we'd do that. He's like, we'd let you do it in the parking lot here if you want. He's like, so he goes back to his boss, and he's like, boss, hey, look, this is a great idea, right? And we could use the corner of the thing. We don't even have to haul them off. And his boss is like, you think that's a great idea, huh? He's like, yeah, I think we should do it. And his boss is like, you're fired. Go try it. Go ahead, go try it. Well, he didn't feel too good then because he's like, I had a wife and I had a kid. And he's like, that was the worst day of my life. To think that I was going to go home and tell my wife, who just had our first kid, I lost my job today. But instead, he did have to tell her that, but instead of just quitting, right, he called up his brother and he's like, hey, bro, how much money you got? And his brother's like, I got $3,000. He said, send it to me. He went to the guy from Albertsons and said, hey, I got fired because of this idea. Would you let me do it? And they were like, sure, we'll let you do it. He took the $3,000, went and bought the equipment that he needed, the air compressor, the nail guns, the saw, and he started right there in the Albertsons parking lot, right? That's what I'm talking about. When you go and find a job or you start to work, it may be a whole different, you'll see something that you're like, that's what I need to do, right? And not only will you see it, it's not just an idea, but you actually see the mechanics of it, the logistics. Anyway, then you can start into actually trying to run the business. One of the things I'd say, don't give up. That's tough because most businesses die in the first 5 years, right? I started with this package, and it's 8 ounces, right? That's not very much. But I did 8 ounces because I wanted to keep the price up. And I thought, my wife would spend $12 for this, right? $12 for her hanging basket. And this will do 6 of them. This packaging was way expensive. This packaging was like, almost cost me like $1.75 for the packaging. Then we went to this one, because that sticker, I was just slapping the sticker on there. This was it's printed on there. Our second packaging. Way cheaper. We went from like $1.75 down to like $1.10. Then, this is our packaging now. We found out from market research, people like flowers, right? They like color. They'll buy it better if it has color, if it has the flower. 37 cents on the packaging, right? These are all things that you learn along the way. It's not easy, but it can be worth it. It can be a lot of fun along the way, right? You meet a lot of great people. You may get a lot of opportunities, right? Like my son's here at Snow, and a few years ago, we had the opportunity to go pitch our product to Lowe's. We went back to Lowe's. They were having like this Into the Blue event. And so Ian and I, we go back to Lowe's, and I tell him about my product. Ian sat there. I don't think he said a word the whole time. He didn't say a word, right? But of all the people there was me, who had brought my son, and there was another lady that had brought her son. Everyone else was like, oh, all business. When we sat down and we talked to Lowe's and we pitched to him, part of the reason why they accepted us was because I brought my son. Then they told us that. Not at the time, just later on the second meeting, when we had a Zoom meeting, they were like, oh, where's Ian? I'm like, oh, he's out making wool pellets right now. And they're like, oh, that is what caught our eye, is that you are a family business and you brought your kid. I mean, usually you get into business, you don't think of that. You don't think about being family oriented or those things. It does make a difference, right? Of being who you are. Don't be afraid to say, this is who I am, right? Whatever your background is, it doesn't matter. Just let you be you. Don't try and be something else. Anyway, I think I'm out of time. So I don't know if there's any questions or.
How long have you been doing it for?
9 years. Yeah.
What kind of plants does it work with? Just tomatoes or?
It'll work with any plant that needs nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. The studies that we did, we started with tomatoes and with in containers. This University of Vermont is with row crops, and so we're expanding the studies with like Montana State, Kentucky, many others.
Are you still producing them at the same mill, or have you moved?
We have learned and upgraded, yes. Because I started with the $1 million mill, but I mean, I couldn't be like, tell my friend like, hey, every time I want to make pellets, can you shut that thing down for me? No. So I had to go buy me a mill, realized that was a mistake with the mill that I bought, and I've moved on from there.
Where do you sell those?
So mostly I sell e-commerce, so online. I do have a distributor in New Jersey and a distributor in the upper Midwest that goes into independent garden centers. Our biggest markets are East Coast, West Coast. So like a lot of people in Utah are like, I've never even heard of it. That's because I don't spend any marketing or advertising in Utah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your time and your attention.